Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Avi Havivi's weekly Siddur class.
We're going to take a break from our larger sequence we've been doing, and we're going to talk today about Tisha B'Av liturgy. That's what we're doing. So if you're not interested, goodbye. Have a good day. Okay. Some of the material I'm going to show you today, if you go to Temple Beth Am or another conservative synagogue, I suspect you are going to see on Tisha B'Av, which is next Tuesday. We learned a few weeks ago when we talked about the 17th of Tammuz, the Mishnah about the bad things that befell us on Tisha B'Av, destruction of the first and second temple, destruction of Beitar, putting down the Bar Kokhba rebellion, two other bad events. So all these things are heaped onto the 9th of Av, our national day of mourning. And to say a word about the liturgy for Tisha B'Av. There are liturgical poems. The word for liturgical poems is piyutim, and there's a subset of piyutim that are called keynote, which means laments, L-A-M-E-N-T, a lament, that's kind of the English technical term, which means a poem that says, oi, 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 we were destroyed, things are terrible. And if you look at a standard book of keynote, there are probably maybe, I don't know, I'm making a guess, 30 to 50 of them in the standard book of keynote. And traditionally, and this is what it is in Orthodox shuls, if you go to an Orthodox shul, they read Echa, the Book of Lamentations from the Bible, only at night on Tisha B'Av. They do not read Echa in the morning. They read keynote, Lamentations. I think the idea is like, oh, the temple was in flames and is destroyed, so in the morning we are totally abject. We don't wear tefillin. We don't sing the davening, although we say the davening, and then we read laments. In the conservative movement, somehow, I don't know when or how this happened, we decided to add that we read Echa in the morning also, kind of in imitation, I guess, of Purim, where you read Megillat Esther at night and then again in the morning. I think some of this was really influenced by summer camp, Camp Ramah, where all of a sudden Tisha B'Av became like the most important Jewish commemoration day of the entire year, simply because it's the only commemoration day that occurs during summer camp. So they had to program for it. And I think some of the influence from Camp Ramah came back into the city. It could also be because keynote, like most liturgical poems, are in really hard Hebrew. So poems in really hard Hebrew, that's hard to say and hard to understand, that we only read once a year. So a lot of people are really not fluent in them. So maybe the custom became like, okay, we'll read Echa again. Everyone knows the melody of Echa. It's only 5 chapters. And then commonly, there's only one kina that is done, Eli Tzion, which everyone knows because of the easy melody. Eli Tzion ve'areha kemo isha v'tzireha. In the last few years at Temple Beth Am, we've become a little more frum, tacked a little bit to the right liturgically, okay, in this regard. And now we do Echa and then several keynote. So we have like a little hybrid of the new conservative minhag of reading Echa and then the more traditional minhag of reading keynote. But if you go to an Orthodox shul, they don't read Echa in the morning and they do like a lot of keynote, like, I don't know, an hour and a half's worth of keynote. Okay. And many of them, because they are in hard Hebrew, many of them have refrains, and the kahal just does the refrain, which is easy to learn. And the refrain is something like, Oy Ali, woe is to me, or Alalai li, woe is to me. So some of the keynote, like a leader will read the line, and then it's very easy to learn the refrain. And the Rabbinical Assembly, the conservative rabbis movement, did come out several years ago with an edition of a Siddur for Tisha B'Av, which contains a selection of keynote in Hebrew and English. With me so far? Okay. Now, along with the practice, I don't want to say along with the practice. The practice evolved that when other destructions or disasters befell the Jewish people, sometimes poets would imitate this tradition and write a keynote. So there are keynote that were written after the Crusades, 1096. There are keynote that are written after the Shoah. And the keynotes let me take a step back. The keynote that are written about Tisha B'Av generally have as their basis things in the book of Eicha, and then things in the Midrashim around Eicha and the destruction of the temple, and a lot of really, really, is Baroque the right word? I don't know. Baroque, horrible descriptions of tortures and stuff, destruction. Some of them very hard to read. And then after the destruction, and again, destruction, I just want to say, doesn't mean a bulldozer knocking down a building. Destruction means civilians are killed. They die under horrible conditions, starvation, plague. They're taken into slavery. Okay. So it's not just like, oh, the building was knocked down. It's really kind of the destruction of I don't want to say a whole entire civilization, because obviously Jewish civilization did survive, but it could be at that moment, you don't know, it might be the destruction of a civilization. Eicha, if you look at it, by the way, carefully when we get there next week, is not mostly about the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, the temple. It is mostly about what happens to civilians in wartime. And God, how could you allow this to happen to us? We know, by the way, that in the ancient Near East, like, the Tanakhs, the Bible's milieu, other cultures also wrote laments over the destruction of their city. And there are laments, like there's Sumerian laments from the year 2000 BCE, 1500 years before the destruction of the temple, that have lines that sound like they could be Eicha. The city is destroyed. She sits alone. Her maidens wander through the streets. Her royalty is reduced to picking garbage out of the dumpster, right? So some of the exact same things we read about in Eicha. So we know that Eicha, ancient Eicha, was like a genre of literature. It was a lament for the destruction of a city. Eicha is our particular Jewish version of that. But we know that other ancient Near Eastern cultures wrote laments also. So in later generations, when there is another Jewish calamity, again, accompanied by great human suffering, like the Crusades, First Crusade, 1096, or the Shoah, the Holocaust, there were people who wrote keynote or laments describing those events. Because, I don't know, I was going to make a general principle, but I can't think of a general principle. General principle is going to be, we don't add more holidays. We compress things into the holidays we have. So these keynote are added with the Tisha B'Av keynote. So if you look at a traditional book of keynote, right, there will be near the end, there's some keynote for the Crusades. Surely there were keynote written for other events in medieval history. We don't necessarily have them unless you're a scholar. And then there's a couple of keynote about the Shoah. Footnote, there was a debate early on in the state of Israel as to when the Shoah should be commemorated. The more traditional Jews, so-called Haredim or ultra-Orthodox, were in favor of commemorating it on the 10th of Tevet, which is already a minor fast day, which is the day when the siege of Jerusalem was established. And that is still when they observe it, right? Haredim don't observe Yom HaShoah. The Knesset, the more secular, wanted to have a separate day to commemorate the Holocaust. By the way, what is that day called in Israel? Anyone know? It's not called Yom HaShoah. That's only partial. It's called Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura, the day that commemorates the Holocaust and resistance. And the day that was picked, I believe, you'd have to Wikipedia. I haven't Wikipedia'd this in a while. I believe was the day of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. I could be a little wrong about that. Okay. Because for purposes of Zionist history, it was important not just to say, oi, 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 we got schmeiced again, but it was important to say, we got schmeiced again, but we fought back and there was resistance, right? So it's a day that commemorates the Shoah and heroism in the face of the depredations of the Shoah. And this is very important. And that's how Yom HaShoah came to be established. Haredim still don't observe Yom HaShoah, and they observe whatever they observe on the 10th of Tevet, which came to be called Yom HaKadish HaKlali, the general Kaddish day, the general day of saying Kaddish for people for whom we don't know the date of their death. Many of the people in the Shoah. Okay? But also, I'm going to finish that footnote, but there were keynote or laments written about the Shoah, which are added into the keynote on Tisha B'Av. Terry, you waved a hand.
I was just going to say, I think I've also heard about it as Yom HaShoah HaZikaron.
No,
is that possible?
No. You're combining things. Yom HaZikaron is the day before Israel Independence Day, and that is the day. That's their Memorial Day. It's the commemoration.
Yes, I know that, but that's also.
But Yom HaShoah, I believe its technical name is Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura. It's about heroism, right? Again, for Israeli Zionist purposes, a day which commemorates only loss and destruction was, again, the traditional Jewish way would be, oi, 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 one more terrible thing that happened to us. That was not the tone that was useful in a new state. So the tone was, terrible things happened to us and people fought back. Our version of that is, having survivors speak. That's our version of the heroism. They survived. Okay, let's pause. So let's come back to the subject at hand. So you may not be surprised to learn, if you haven't heard of it already, that some Israelis have written new keynote this year in the wake of October 7th, the pogrom of October 7th. So their attitude is, just as Jews have written poems of lament to add to our traditional liturgy, and we say those poems of lament not on other days in the calendar to commemorate those events, but we load it all onto Tisha B'Av by way of, focusing all of our lament for destruction in the past on one day. This becomes then the day of commemoration of all of the destructions and sufferings that befell our people. Okay. So there are people who've written piyutim for Tisha B'Av that commemorate the pogrom of October 7th. I am aware of this because the Conservative Rabbinical Assembly sent a few of them around, 3 of them to be specific. I will share them with you today. And I'm guessing it's possible that, one of the rabbis at Beth, or we have 40 listeners out there, maybe some other conservative Masorti shul that you attend, you may see this next Tuesday.
When we look at these, are you going to talk about any construction rules or traditions?
No. Little bit of literary, little bit. Okay. Very little. By the way, sorry, trigger warning. Okay. The terrible things happened on October 7th, and It's not, yeah. I mean, it talks about murder and rape and stuff like that, people being burned. So trigger warning. Okay. So we're going to have a quick look at three of them, and then listen to the third one. Has music, and I will try to. I'm never as good as sharing with the music, with the audio or video, but I'll try. Okay. Let's start with, okay. So some of this Hebrew you will recognize. Echa yashva badad nir oz Rabat Yam, right? First line of Echa. Echa yashva badad ha'ir Rabat Yam. How she sat alone, the city that used to be teeming with people, right? Haita almana. I'm going to translate in a moment. Sterot haita almana. Kirya haluma umi ne'emana. How she sits alone near Oz, one of the kibbutzim that was devastated. Oh, sorry. I read it wrong, and I missed the play on words. It's not Rabati Rabati Dam, right? It's Rabati and Echa in here. All right, so how she sat alone near Oz, full of blood. Sterot, the town, Haitake Almana, became like a widow, a smitten city, and who will stand up for her? I'm going to go to English in a moment, I promise. Echa yashva badad bamamad, mishpacha ve'od achat ve'od achat. How she sat alone, mamad is the acronym for the safe room. How she sat desolate or alone in the safe room. Mishpacha, a family, and another family, and another family. Echa yashvu badad tatzpitaniot rabati ayin, velo haita hakshava vishua ayin. How they sat alone. So fe, the root means to look out, to scout. Who are the tatzpataniot? Anyone remember? Terry is nodding.
Yeah, they were the women that were the assigned to be watching over
the female watchers who were unarmed,
Gaza, and they had warned in advance,
and who were slaughtered, right? Yep. So how they sat alone, the lookout women, Rabati Ayin, with a lot of eyes because they were lookouts, Velo Haita Hakshava, but no one listened to them, Vishua Ayin, okay? Echayashvu Badad Tzirot Utzirim, how they dwelled alone, the young men and young women, B'mistorei Shuchot V'sichim, in gullies and ditches, Pasku Rikudehem Umiyachaltseim, they stopped their dancing, and there was and who saved them? This is about Nova. Echa yashvu badad chatufot v'chatufim v'adayin yoshvim. How they dwell alone, the kidnapped men and women, and they're still there. 120 men, women, children. It's really hard to read this. Bacho bochim balayla. That's Echa. Bacho tivke balayla. She cries all night. Jerusalem. Here it's they cry all night. The hostages. Dimaot al lichayehem ve'ein menachem. This is Echa language, with eyes on with tears rolling down their cheeks and no comforters. Okay, so here's the English, right? Which you can look at it. I'll try to post it. It's really the same thing, and that's how it ends. That's how that poem ends. Hostages crying at night. Occasionally, as we'll see in some other keynote may end with a note of hope for the future. If you look at the classic keynote in a keynote book, some of them end with a note of hope for the future. Some of them don't. So this one doesn't. So that's one that is written by Nurit Hirschfeld-Shupinski, survivor of the slaughter in kibbutz Nahal Oz. Second one by Leora Elon, survivor of Kfar Aza. I won't do as much Hebrew for this. Echa hafchu mishkenotayach le'iyei choravot anashayach legolim ba'artzam. Oh, how your dwelling places have turned into ruins, your citizens into exiles in their own country. Okay. By the way, this one, look at the second one. Echa charvu kibbutzayach arim shamemu. Oh, how your kibbutzim were destroyed, your cities became desolate. Anashayach metim sidotayach nashamu. Your people dead, your fields abandoned. I'm going to go right to the English in this. By the way, this one is, I think, political. Middle of the first verse. Besides, oh, how your dwelling's been turned into ruins, your people become exiles in their own land. O betrayed land, your sons betrayed you. They put their desires before all else. Pretty political. They sealed your fate with their very tongues. They abandoned you in their hearts, lost in their ways. Okay.
Who wrote this one?
Leora Elon from Kibbutz Kfar Aza.
Mm-hmm.
Sons and daughters butchered, maidens hauled into captivity. And again, all of this, these images would be familiar to anyone who reads Echa or who reads, sorry, let me get rid of that. Or who reads the Piyutim of Tisha B'Av. So these are written intentionally in the style of Piyutim. It's not, I'm just going to write a poem. By the way, there's lots of music, lots of poetry that actually has been written in the wake of October 7th. Okay. But these in particular were written to be in the style of keynote. Okay. I am certain that they were written on purpose for, these are things we should add to our Tisha B'Av liturgy. We shouldn't just be bewailing things that happened in 1096, almost 1,000 years ago, when there are terrible things that happened within the last year. Okay. And then this piyut ends on a note of positive. We will yet return and rebuild you the soil of our homeland. We'll yet return and sing in your fields a joyous song. Okay. And we'll return for neighbors and fellows who had become our enemies when our eyes will see peace between us. Right. So this is clearly a left-leaning piyut. Right. We'll cast the prayer together for borders of tranquility, for becoming good neighbors, for leaders with humility, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Bernie.
Yeah, I was read the New York Times. Today's the anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and there's a whole thing very reminiscent, not with poem, but with pictures.
Yes.
Of the survivors and what people
went through. Right. Again, and it all goes back to the poem for the destruction of Ur, Sumerian, which I think is 2000 or 2200 BCE. Okay. Meaning the human impulse to bear witness to and commemorate devastation. I don't know. Hiroshima Day is coming up also. Okay. Which frequently coincides with Tisha B'Av. I think, what is it, August 8th or 7th? It's this Thursday, I think. I think it's the 8th. Okay. All right.
They talked about it today on the radio today.
Oh, today? The 6th? Okay, I don't know. All right. The third one, okay.
I get them mixed up.
Was written by a guy who calls himself a Paitan, a piyut writer. I don't know anything. I haven't Wikipedia'd him. I don't know anything else about him. But this would be an interesting task. Okay. It's obviously not here. Give me a second. I am. Okay. I'm going to pause sharing for a moment. Okay. And I'm going to go to this. And I'm going to come back and share in another moment. I am resuming share. Okay. Oops. Did I resume or not yet? Yes. Okay. You see, Kinat Be'eri, Yagel Harush. Yes. Okay. So Yagel Harush is this guy. We'll watch him perform this, right? Echab, by the way, as you know from PU team in general, some of them are very simple. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Le'et Nasa V'chefzo Kol. So that's like a really simple rhythm scheme. And then you know some of the PU team for the high holidays that are much more, for Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, that are more complex, several lines, a refrain. Sometimes they rhyme, sometimes they don't. So this guy, Yagel Harush, has written a piyut that is intentionally a very simple meter and rhyme scheme. Okay? Echa be'eri hafcha lekivri. Oh, how be'eri, which means my well, but is also a pun, obviously, on kibbutz be'eri. Hafcha lekivri has turned into my grave. V'yom me'ori hafach shechori. My day of brightness has turned dark. V'hushchat kol pri v'nepach shiri, einin of amayim me'omek shivri. And all fruit has been destroyed, and my singing has been transformed. My eye sheds tears from the depth of my brokenness. So notice in this piyut, einin of amayim me'omek shivri is the refrain for every verse. Okay? And then we have, again, this could be, zaken ve'olel, elders and children, infants. This is in Echa and in Piyutim. Okay? Women taken into captivity. Okay? And how long? But this does end with now a note of positivity. Last three lines. This is talking to God. Ve'ata kuma l'ha'ir neiri. So now arise to light my candle. Uve'ein rachamecha terapei shivri. Right? Notice these every line ends with my eyes are crying me omek shivri, from the depths of my brokenness. And here we say uve'ein rachamecha terapei shivri, and from the ayin means eye and wellspring. Okay, it's a pun, just like be'eri means well, and it's the name of a kibbutz. And with your merciful eye, heal my shever, my brokenness. Ve'eni hanova'at tashke be'eri, and my flowing eye, ayin, but it's a double entendre. It also means my flowing well, meaning my eye, which was shedding tears, is now going to become a well, which is flowing. Tashke be'eri. It will water my well, but it means it will water the place named Be'eri. Okay? So this is obviously, I don't know about the other two. I don't know anything about if they've been set to music, because all I know is what the Rabbinical Assembly sent around these three PU team. I have not dug around on the internet to see more PU team written for October 7th. By the way, there's a whole poetry series you can find online about poems post October 7th. I'll give you a name. You can find her on the internet and sign up. Rachel Korazim, 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 Korazim. She's an Israeli who teaches poetry a lot to Americans, and she's got an online series. She has all kinds of online courses and materials of contemporary. I mean, she studies Israeli poetry of the 20th century and I guess 21st century in general, but she has a whole online series of poetry post October 7th. And I think, I think the series might be over. I don't know, but I think you can actually find the material at her website. Okay. So I'm going to, I will post all of that, including the YouTube, so that you can listen to the whole thing. It does have English on the subtitles on the screen. So you can listen, not necessarily later today, but between now and Tisha B'Av. He got a whole not only, he whole instrumentation with an ensemble there. So, my I don't want to say my hat's off because it's a sad thing, but the Israeli impulse, the human impulse, Israeli version to approach tragedy in some way, spurring creativity to I don't know what to say, to commemorate in a meaningful way. And I'm impressed by these Israeli attempts to say, okay, we have a day, Tisha B'Av, which commemorates the disasters that befell our people. This is one more disaster, and let us add its commemoration so that we're not only talking about things that happened 2,000 years ago, right? But that we're talking about things that are with us today. Question or comment? Terry?
I seem to be rather talkative today.
That's fine. Good.
When I was in Israel over Pesach, one of the things that so impressed me was the exhibitions at various museums in Tel Aviv that already were showing artwork and expressions of people who were artists who were grappling with what happened after October 7th, and that was in April. And it's so fascinating and impressive to me that people were able to begin to work through trauma in that way.
Correct. Right. It's what artists do, right? So, the people who wrote poems, these people, I assume they're not just regular people who decided I'll write a poem. They're poets who know how to write. And there are a lot of examples of these. I just find this little liturgical aspect of it connected to Tisha B'Av interesting and relevant to our class. As they say all the time in Israel, Shenishma Besorot Tovot. May we hear good tidings. Everyone in Israel is on pins and needles at the moment right now, as well as people in other parts of the world in terms of what's going to happen over the next few days or the next week. We obviously will not have class on Tisha B'Av next Tuesday. We will resume the week after, I think, but I think that might be the week we have Rabbi Rembaum coming to talk to us about his ancestor, the Rambam, and prayer. Okay. Stay healthy. Shenishma Besorot Tovot. May we all hear good tidings.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.